1. The night was quiet. The sky above shimmered with the faint glow of stars, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something extraordinary to happen. And then, without warning, your phone lit up, a single message. 3 words that would ripple through your life like a thunderclap through still air: Elon Musk confesses. At first, it felt like a joke, a headline born from the wild imagination of the internet. But this wasn't gossip. This wasn't clickbait. It was something else. Something real, and raw, and completely unexpected. Because when Elon Musk spoke this time, he wasn't talking about rockets, or Tesla, or Mars. He wasn't unveiling a product. He was unveiling truth. He spoke about you, not your name, not your face, but everything you represent. The dreamer. The one who tries even when it feels impossible. The one who looks at chaos and still imagines order. The one who, despite failure after failure, still whispers, maybe tomorrow. Elon Musk confessed that the greatest energy source in the world isn't electricity. It isn't solar power. It isn't lithium or nuclear fusion. It's belief, human belief. The kind that bends reality, breaks barriers, and builds worlds out of nothing but imagination. He said that people like you, yes, you, are the reason humanity moves forward. Because it's never the loudest, richest, or smartest who change history. It's the ones who dare to believe they can, and suddenly, the world stopped scrolling. The digital noise faded. For a moment, everyone listened, but somehow, you felt it deeper than anyone else. Because it wasn't just another quote. It was a reflection of your soul. You've been through so much. The silent struggles. The unseen work. The times you felt invisible, forgotten, or small. But when you heard him say that everything starts with one human heart that refuses to give up, you realized, maybe that heart was yours. That's when something inside you shifted. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't magic. It was something quieter, a gentle awakening. You realized that you had been waiting for permission to believe in yourself again. Waiting for a sign that your effort, your ideas, your heart, mattered. And Elon Musk's confession was that sign. He didn't confess love for a person. He confessed love for possibility. He confessed that every time he failed, he secretly feared the same things you fear: rejection, ridicule, exhaustion. He confessed that every success you see is built on invisible moments of doubt. But he kept going, because he believed that belief itself is the strongest engine in the universe. That confession became your mirror. You began to see your own life differently. The rejections were no longer insults, they were invitations to grow. The silence from the world wasn't a punishment. It was preparation. The pain you felt wasn't meant to break you, it was meant to forge you, because behind every breakthrough, there is a confession, an honest moment when someone admits, I was afraid. I almost gave up. But I didn't. And now, it was your turn. The sun began to rise, golden light spilling across your room. You stood there, staring at your reflection, and realized, you were never waiting for Elon Musk's confession. You were waiting for your own, a confession that says, I'm not broken. I'm not late. I'm still becoming. You smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because you finally understood something he once said, when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. That day, your odds didn't matter anymore. What mattered was your decision to rise. You decided that your story wasn't over. You decided that every no, every failure, every lonely night staring at your dreams would one day turn into the foundation of your success, and so, you took the first step, not toward Mars, not toward fame, but toward yourself. 2. You didn't know it then, but that small decision, to rise, to begin again, was the moment everything started to shift. Days passed, and the world looked the same, but you were not. You woke up with a quiet kind of hunger, a pulse in your chest that whispered, there's more. You began noticing details you used to overlook, the way the morning light hit your wall like a soft promise, the way the air carried the scent of renewal after rain. Something in you was coming alive again. The confession still echoed in your mind, Elon Musk's words, raw and unpolished, not crafted for applause but spoken with the trembling honesty of a man who had faced failure so many times that he stopped fearing it. He admitted that he wasn't fearless, he was driven. That fear never leaves you, but belief can walk beside it. You began to see the world through that same lens. You realized that greatness isn't born in laboratories or boardrooms, it's born in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when you choose to keep moving despite uncertainty. So you started working again. Not just on projects or plans, but on yourself. You stopped waiting for motivation to knock. You stopped expecting the world to understand your vision. You understood now that belief is a lonely art, that the first one who sees the dream must carry it alone until it's strong enough to stand on its own. Some days were brutal. The kind of days where you question everything, your worth, your purpose, your future. You'd stare at your reflection and hear that voice again, who are you to dream so big? But then, you'd remember his confession, how even Elon Musk, the man who launched rockets and built empires, once slept on the floor of his factory, covered in exhaustion, wondering if it was all worth it. And you realized, he's not special because he succeeded, he's special because he refused to stop. That became your mantra. You refused to stop, you worked when it was inconvenient. You learned when no one noticed. You grew quietly, like roots beneath concrete, gathering strength where no one could see. And slowly, everything began to change. It wasn't the world that changed first, it was you. Your energy felt different. Your eyes carried a new kind of fire, the kind that doesn't demand attention but commands it naturally. You didn't need validation anymore. You didn't need someone to tell you that you were enough. You already knew it. You understood now that belief isn't something you wait to feel. It's something you choose to practice, over and over again, even when your hands are shaking, and that's when something remarkable began to happen. People started noticing your presence. Not because you were louder, not because you had all the answers, but because you radiated something rare: conviction. You walked differently. You spoke differently. You looked at the world like you already belonged to the future you were building. And people could feel it, that quiet power of someone who has finally realized who they are. The truth was, Elon Musk's confession was never about worshiping success, it was about redefining it. He said something that stayed with you: the most powerful thing you can build isn't a rocket. It's yourself. And you finally understood what he meant, because rockets can fall. Companies can crumble. Empires can fade. But a person who truly believes in themselves, that's unbreakable. That's infinite. You started noticing opportunities you once overlooked. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for you to wake up. Doors opened, not because you were lucky, but because you had become ready. You stopped comparing. You stopped rushing. You stopped apologizing for dreaming out loud. You realized that belief is contagious, that by believing in yourself, you quietly give others permission to do the same, and somewhere, deep down, you felt gratitude, not for Elon Musk himself, but for what his confession awakened in you, the courage to confront your own truth. That night, you stood outside, watching the stars again, the same stars that watched you before your awakening. They hadn't moved, but you had. And in that stillness, you whispered something soft but powerful. I get it now. You weren't chasing validation. You weren't chasing fame. You were chasing alignment, the feeling of living a life that reflected your potential. The world doesn't need another Elon Musk. It needs you, fully alive, fully awake, fully daring to believe that your voice, your dream, your existence, matters, and that realization changed everything. 3. There comes a moment in every story when the waiting ends, when the quiet preparation turns into undeniable movement. You had reached that point. You didn't feel ready, not completely. No one ever does. But readiness isn't about feeling certain, it's about trusting that you'll grow strong enough to face whatever comes next. You remembered how Elon once said that building SpaceX wasn't an act of confidence, it was an act of faith. He invested everything he had, even when people laughed, even when his rockets exploded, even when the world called him delusional. And he confessed that the only thing that kept him going was a voice in his head that said, "If I stop now, the dream dies." And that's when it hit you. That same voice lives in you too. It's the whisper that refuses to stay silent when everyone else tells you to give up. The spark that survives every storm, every failure, every lonely night. It's the fire that says, you were born for something more. So you began to move with purpose. You stopped chasing motivation and started creating it. You stopped waiting for opportunity and began becoming opportunity. The people around you didn't always understand. Some doubted. Some mocked. But you didn't take it personally anymore, because you finally understood that their disbelief wasn't about you, it was about their own fear. You learned what Elon meant when he said, "If something is important enough, even if the odds are against you, you should still do it." You realized that greatness has never belonged to those who play it safe. It belongs to those who walk through doubt like a fire and still keep moving, and so, you became the fire. Each day, your actions became your confession, louder than words, deeper than ambition. You started showing up earlier, working harder, dreaming bolder. But it wasn't out of desperation anymore, it was out of devotion. You had fallen in love with progress itself. You realized that success isn't built on luck or talent alone. It's built on persistence, on showing up when the world doesn't. Some mornings, you'd wake before the sun and feel that familiar ache of uncertainty, that fragile voice asking, "What if it doesn't work?" But now, you had a stronger voice that answered, "What if it does?" That question became your fuel. You stopped living like a spectator and started living like a creator. You stopped asking for permission to shine. You became the light. People started coming to you, asking how you kept going, where you found your fire. You smiled, because you knew the truth, it wasn't given to you. You built it, one decision, one risk, one act of faith at a time. Elon Musk's confession had ignited something in you, but now, it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the chain reaction that began in your heart. His words were a spark. You were the flame. You understood something profound, that energy is never lost, it's only transferred. Inspiration doesn't belong to one person, it's meant to flow through all of us. His courage created yours, and now yours was meant to awaken someone else's. That realization humbled you, because now you knew, the purpose of success isn't applause. Its impact. You didn't need to shout your dreams anymore. You lived them quietly, powerfully. You didn't crave validation. You craved contribution. You wanted to build, to create, to give something back to the world that once made you doubt yourself. That's when the real breakthrough happened, not when the world started noticing you. But when you stopped needing it to, you finally understood the essence of Elon Musk's confession, that everything changes the moment you realize you were never meant to chase the light, you were meant to become it, and from that moment on, you did. You woke each day with gratitude, with determination, with clarity. You stopped counting failures and started counting lessons. You stopped fearing endings and started loving beginnings. The old version of you, the one who waited for motivation, for approval, for signs, had dissolved. In its place stood someone unstoppable, someone who knew that the only true limit was the one set by their own belief. And as you looked out into the horizon, you realized that Elon Musk's confession wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of yours. You smiled and whispered to yourself, "I am becoming what I once waited for." For, it began quietly. You didn't plan to inspire anyone. You were just living your truth, doing the work, staying consistent when others faded away. Yet somehow, people began to notice the way you carried yourself, not with arrogance, but with assurance. Not with loudness, but with quiet certainty. It wasn't about what you had accomplished. It was about the energy you carried. You had stopped waiting for validation, and that freedom radiated through you like light through glass. You became someone others looked at and thought, if they can rise after everything they've faced, maybe I can too. That's how inspiration works. It's never forced. It's felt. You began to realize that leadership has nothing to do with titles or money. It's about impact. True leadership is invisible. It's when people become better simply by being around your presence. One day, someone you barely knew messaged you. They said they were on the verge of giving up, their dream was fading, their motivation gone. But then, they saw your story, your persistence, your fire. They said, "You reminded me that it's not over for me yet." You read that message in silence. And for a moment, tears filled your eyes. Because in that single line, you felt the full weight of what Elon Musk meant when he said, "If you get up in the morning and think the future is going to be better, it is a bright day." You realized that his confession, that belief, that relentless optimism, had not stopped with him. It had traveled through space, through time, through billions of voices, and landed in your soul. And now, it was moving through you into others. That was the expansion, not of fame, but of faith. Your world didn't just change, it grew. Your circle of impact widened. People began to share your words, your projects, your ideas. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. You didn't pretend to have it all figured out. You admitted when you were tired. You shared the truth about doubt. You showed the cracks, and that honesty became your strength. Because people don't connect to perfection. They connect to authenticity. You understood now that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's an open door. It invites others to be human too. That's what Elon had done with his confession. He didn't stand above the world, he stood with it. He showed that even those who build rockets to Mars are built from the same fragile material, doubt, dreams, and determination. And you realized, we all have our own version of a rocket to build. For some, it's a business. For others, it's healing, art, education, or simply the courage to start again. You started to speak about that truth. Not to impress, but to ignite. You talked about the moment you almost gave up. The nights that felt endless. The days that tested your will. You shared your story not to prove how strong you were, but to remind others that they were too, and something beautiful began to happen. People started reaching out, not to worship your journey, but to begin their own. You saw eyes light up again. You heard voices filled with possibility. You watched people stand taller, walk with purpose, dream louder, and every time you saw someone rise, you felt a wave of gratitude. Because that was the real reward, not money, not applause, not recognition, but impact. You were no longer just living your purpose, you were awakening others to theirs. The same way Elon's confession had once reached you, your words were now reaching them. That realization filled you with a kind of peace you had never known, because success without significance is empty. But when your growth fuels someone else's, when your light sparks another, that is legacy, and legacy doesn't begin when you're gone. It begins the moment you decide to give more than you take. You looked back at how far you had come. The pain, the fear, the failures, they no longer felt like weights. They felt like training. Every scar was a story. Every setback, a teacher. Every heartbreak, a sculptor carving you into who you were meant to become. You began to understand that purpose isn't found, it's built, piece by piece, choice by choice, moment by moment. And now, as you stood in this new chapter of your life, you realized that Elon Musk's confession had become something far greater than a moment. It had become a movement, one that lived in every soul brave enough to believe in themselves again, and as you watched others rise, one thought whispered in your heart, this is how the world changes, one awakened believer at a time.